Hello and welcome to The Inquisitive Crafter. I'm Katrina Stewart from Crafty Jacks, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about spinning color. Now, what I can cover in a short video is by no means the full extent of all of the different things that you can do when you're making decisions about spinning color, but I hope I can give you a few questions to ask yourself so that you've got a good place to start from. If you're looking for something a little bit more in-depth, a couple of years ago, Rachel Smith and I wrote a book called Unbraided, The Art and Science of Spinning Color, and you can pick that up on my website. It's available as an ebook, or if you're local to us in BC, there are a few local libraries that carry it. And in here we go through a little bit more in depth of different techniques that you can use to manage color, and we talk a little bit about color theory and things like that. So there's a resource for you. In terms of making decisions when you're dealing with one of those fun braids that you've picked up at a local fiber festival, the very first thing that you need to do is to take it apart and look at it. So this is the whole unbraided part of it. You need to see the colors and how they repeat, and you need to see how long those repeats are. And you need to see how many repeats of color you have. So in this case, this braid goes from pink to sort of a bluey or a reddy purple, a bluey purple, a blue, a green, a yellow, and an orange, and then you can see that it starts to repeat itself. And when we start folding those braids along those full repeats, we can see that we have 5.5 repeats of colors. So if we were to count each of those full repeats that go from the pink to the orange, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we've got a little half one here because it only covers 4 of the colors. So there you go. So we've got 5.5 repeats. Now the questions that we need to start asking ourselves are, what drew us to the braid in the first place? Was it the really bright colors? Do we want to maintain that? If we want to maintain really bright colors, you can do it in a couple of ways. You can spin a little bit thicker, or you can chain ply your yarn. So that's where you would spin your braid from one end to the other, make one continuous single, and then chain ply it. So there's that option. If we really like the colors, but we're a little bit worried that it's too bright for us, we could do something called a fractal. And a fractal is where we take the braid and we split it into 2 or 3 pieces, and then we divide the braid even further from there. So when we look at fiber, I've got a little piece tucked in behind here, we can take our braids and split them apart. And when we're doing something like this, when we're looking at color, every time we take that and we split this apart, we reduce the amount of length that is going to be produced from that chunk of color. So let's say this chunk of color is going to produce 5 feet of yarn. If we were to split that in half, theoretically each of those halves would make 2.5 feet of yarn. If we were to split it in 4, that would be further divided down to 1.25 pieces of length of yarn for each of those singles. So the more we split our fiber into finer and finer pieces, the less length you're going to get out of a strip of color on a hand-painted braid. So when you do a fractal, usually what you have is one section of your braid is spun from end to end with the full amount. Your next one, let's say you split it into 2, you spin the first one from end to end, and then you spin the second piece from end to end, starting at the same point. So when you get, if we call this the end, when you get to this end, you start over again at the pink. And so what that does is when you go to apply those 2 colors together, you get a lot more barber pulling and mixing of colors, which really tends to soften the colors, and it has some optical mixing. So optical mixing is when colors sort of blend together. And so in this case, let's say a little bit of the orange and green mixed together, you're going to get optical mixing, and from a distance that might look a little bit brown. And that's where a lot of people run into trouble when they're spinning color, is they're worried about that optical mixing and how that's going to affect their finished yarn. Is it going to muddy it? Is it going to make the colors look less vibrant? And the short answer is, when you have a complementary colorway like this is, where you have colors that are across each other on the color wheel, when those colors mix together, it is going to cause a softening and a muddying of the colors. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're dealing with a really bright braid, that might be something that you want to do. Your next question is what are you spinning for? So if I was to spin this braid for a shawl, I would probably spin it differently than if I was spinning it for socks. For me, I waffle back and forth on bright colors. I'm getting a little bit better about wearing them, but for a long time I wore a lot of gray, black, and white, and I didn't have a lot of colors in my wardrobe. And as I get better about it, I'm less worried about softening something like this. But if I was to spin this for socks, I would want to preserve the really bright, vibrant colors. And so probably what I would end up doing is spinning it for fraternal socks, where you create one sock in one way of spinning and another sock in another way of spinning, so you have matching socks that aren't perfectly matched. So for instance, what I might want to do is split this fiber into 2 pieces so that I've got equal amounts for each of those socks. And what I would probably do with one of them is, to preserve the colors, I would spin all of this to one bobbin and then chain ply it, which would preserve all of these colors in the color order and give me a really strongly striped sock. With the other half, I would probably do a fractal to mix it up and soften it. So I'd have really one bright, colorful striped sock and one sort of softened sock. And so those are a couple of ideas of what you can do with these brightly colored braids. Like I said, there's so much information out there. Do a little bit of research and play. That is one of the best things that I have ever done, is to play with color and experiment and see what works for me and see what I like. Don't forget to ask yourself, what is it that drew you to that braid in the first place? What is it that you want to preserve? What is it that you want that fiber to say to you when you're finished spinning it? And also, what project are you using it for? I hope these questions help you make some decisions. If you have questions that you would like us to answer in a future video, please send your questions to ask@craftyjacks.ca. That's ask@craftyjacks.ca, and we will do our very best to do that for you. That's it for today. Bye for now. Have a great day.